Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
The headline from the Fargo Forum was North Dakota's teacher shortage creating imminent peril as board seeks emergency rule. Now, the board we're talking about is called the Education Standards and Practices Board, or ESPB. And, well, they're involved in exactly what you think they are. It's teacher licensing, and North Dakota has a teacher shortage, and they want Governor Doug Burgum to allow some emergency rules that would allow college students who finish their education coursework to be the teacher of record during their one semester of student teaching. And what that would allow essentially, and my guest, Becky Pitkin, who is on the board, she can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Essentially, that would allow, Becky, these student teachers to teach in a classroom without supervision. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of the stipulations in the rules that we sent or the requests that we sent to the governor was that there would be a collaborating teacher in the building. That's one of the stipulations. And if there isn't one, then that situation won't work. So this is not for all pre-service teachers, but yes, that's absolutely correct. They've finished all their teacher ed coursework with the exception of what we would call the student teaching or the internship, which is a 10-week, the minimum of 10-week experience with a cooperating teacher where there's a gradual release of responsibility model. And so one of the stipulations is there be a collaborating teacher in the building, preferably one that has completed the mentoring program so that they would be skilled in coaching. No. But as you know, not somebody right in the classroom with them.
One quick follow-up on that. How does the board expect, I'm assuming that you're not looking at this as any sort of a permanent solution. This is a Band-Aid, I think maybe is a fair way to put it. How exactly do you see this easing the problem schools are facing right now?
Philosophically, ESPB has tried very hard not to strip standards. We don't want to lower standards for students. We've had some statutory changes lately in the last 2 sessions that have allowed people who have taken a competency-based test with no exposure to children and no teacher ed courses to come into the classroom and get an initial license. We have a lot of different pieces. We've tried an out-of-field endorsement. We've increased sub flexibility. So we don't see this as long-term. We see it as a piece for a part of time. It has a sunset clause. Our board was not comfortable on having this be forever. In those 2 years that we pilot it, and our N is not going to be high, realistically. But we feel like a few pieces here, a few pieces there, and hopefully with our apprenticeship work and, in collaboration with the union and getting high schoolers to love our profession, we can go a different route. But no, none of our board thinks this is the best thing ever. We all agree that there is a shortage, and what we're finding is it's just not the warm bodies out there. We're not taking away any value from regular teachers. I was one for 30 years. Teaching is the best, but the next best or the next worst is someone who's completed teacher ed, all the coursework except the practicum. And we know if you don't have a great practicum experience, you're going to leave the field. We don't want that either. We get it. And so we work closely with higher ed, and it's not going to be a large number at this point. I can guarantee that for fall. Maybe in the spring or maybe the next 3 semesters where we can actually pilot this. But
So,
so
so Rob, you didn't do your normal introduction of your co-host. So this is Chad Oban, who's a Friday co-host. In my real life, I'm the executive director of North Dakota United, who represents teachers and public employees. And frankly, our organization is opposed to this rule change, which comes as no surprise to hopefully either of you or the people listening that the teachers union would be against lowering standards. But we can talk about, this specific rule. But, one of the things that frustrated me about the headline that Rob just read is that headline could have been in the Fargo Forum every July and August going back to 2016 and maybe prior to that. It could be in every single of the 50 states. This is not a problem that is new. And so I want to talk a little bit about process here. So the ESPB board did not bring up this idea during the last session for the legislature to vet. The ESPB board has the option to do a normal rule change, which would allow for public input and the legislature to be part of this. Instead, you guys called an emergency meeting 1 week before a regularly scheduled meeting where you had 3 or 4 new board members on board at this first meeting. From no public input from teachers, from parents, from stakeholders at the meeting. Why the rush to get this done at this point when this issue has been an issue since 2016? It seems like there's an effort to circumvent the legislature a little bit here. And I think the messaging is pretty terrible, that it almost seems like the issue's just been discovered. And we are now in this terrible peril that we have to rush through this rule at the last second rather than going through the several normal processes you have. So tell me why the process? And I think, frankly, if ESPB would have brought people together 2 months ago or 10 years ago to have these conversations, we might have landed in a better place. But I know the members that I talk to are very upset of this being crammed through. I talked to several administrators, including one I spent in the car with for 5 hours yesterday, who think this is a terrible idea and it's setting up teachers for failure and to leave the profession in the long run. Why not take in that input rather than just cram this through in an emergency meeting a month before school starts?
That's a really good question, Chad. Thank you. So this had come across our agenda long ago at the teacher shortage retreat last summer. And it was one of those ideas that's out there. Other states were doing it. And we just didn't think it was a great idea because we know that if they don't, like I said, if they don't have a great experience, they're not going to stay. Our correspondence from the summer, I think what caused the actual icing on the cake was I went to our attorney with new rules. We're in the rules process right now. You receive those. We always send them to United. We get comment. So we're in the rules process now. And I went over after getting multiple calls, more calls than usual this year, saying, okay, here's your rules about subs, but we're going to put a sub in the classroom all year. We had increased board cases of people who were subbing all year long without the correct qualifications. And when we think about what's best for kids, is it okay to have somebody as a sub with no teacher ed for children somewhere that parents might not be able to advocate for or not even know? And so I fully understand. So I think it was the angst of people saying, I don't have anyone except someone who has less than a 4-year degree and whatever, and that's what I'm going to have to do. We didn't think that this would help solve the problem. So it's local control. It's not for every school. Principals get to choose. If it's not a good idea, then don't do it. It's just another menu item. And then we want to go the rules process way using examples other states have used. So,
but Becky, at some point, administrators coming to you and saying, hey, we need to change this rule so I can fill this. It reminds me of somebody who's not doing the hard work. And then you're sort of appeasing that, right? They're already breaking the law, or they have to break the law to keep a sub in the school all year. Sure. So therefore, we're going to change the rules. Aren't we just easing bad behavior by just changing the rules to fit what they're already doing?
I get that perception. We talk about that in the office. Just because you call and tell us you're going to do something doesn't mean we're going to make the rules to match your behavior. That's not how we roll. We don't roll like that. I think it was I went over to our attorney and said, "This is what's happening. How fast can I do this? Like, I have something in the rules process. Can you help me get this? Is there something I can do faster? Like, what is the process?" And she said, "Well, you have a process established by the legislator. It's called emergency rule." So we made that decision, and I had talked to when I met with our board members, I explained the shortage to them, except not one, because we got her, even though she's been in a lot of subgroups, we got her very quickly. But one of our new board members was at the shortage summit last summer. He wasn't a board member, he went as a teacher. And so we were looking for a solution, and we thought if this helps a little, we'll put an end date, and then we'll go through regular process as we've done every single time. So, and at our board meeting yesterday, we generated lots of possibilities to bring to the stakeholders. So this was one that we weren't trying to fix people who were doing it incorrectly, because that's a knee-jerk reaction. We try hard not to do that. And this year we felt like it was a matter of people. And so this might be a little piece that could provide even 10 or 20. I mean, it's all up to the governor. We were just giving another local control option. We're not picking these student teachers over other teachers. There is no one else. So, and it's not going to be a lot because the universities aren't going to let them. So
I was going to ask that question. I actually have some personal experience. My wife actually just completed her first year as a teacher, and the year previous she was doing her practicum and all that. And I mean, I was with her when she was going through all that, and I don't think she would have been comfortable at all during as good as she did in her first full year as a teacher. I don't think she would have been comfortable at all doing her practicum, being in that classroom on her own, without having another, an experienced teacher there to guide her and to get her over the rough spots of just, classroom control and other things that teachers have to learn how to do. So I worry that we're putting student teachers in a terrible situation. We live in the education community in North Dakota is relatively small. And so if a student teacher is asked to do something like this, are they going to be afraid to say no? Because they're going to be feeling like they're saying no to somebody who could be making a hiring decision about them at some point in the future. I worry that you're putting student teachers in a really bad situation where they feel like they have to do this, because if they say no, maybe somebody who's going to be in a position to hire them in the future is going to say, oh, well, they're not a team player. When we asked them to step up, they wouldn't step up. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, of course, absolutely. And that's something we thought about. The intent is not to have EPPs put pressure on student teachers. Most of them are placed for fall. The ones that this would most likely impact, as I noted, was a very small end, but they're ones who are in a classroom alone already. And we didn't do it for them. I don't know who they are, but part of it is they have to be asked, and the EPPs have rubrics to determine and criteria to determine who would like to do this. And I don't think universities are going to put pressure on people to do it. Districts might, but I don't think, I'm not a fool. I've been in all those different places, but I do understand the concern. Our board does. We get that. So again, it's the governor's decision. If it goes through, I would say from the feedback from EPPs for this semester, it would not be very many, because they're already placed and they're not pulling people out of placements at all.
Becky, how do these student teachers get paid? Do they get paid as a sub? Do they get a full teacher contract? Is this a way that districts may try to save some money by throwing? So how do they get paid? Is it as a sub or as a regular teacher?
Chad, in our rules, it says that student teachers can already be paid. And when districts call and ask us, we just say that's total local control. It's like the permit bill where they're a local expert. They're not on a teacher contract, but we really leave that up to districts. And just from what I know, and again, we don't collect data on this, but districts are paying as long-term subs or subs because they don't have the 4-year degree yet. So that's really local control, just like we left it up to them for the permit. Those people from House Bill 1531. So we just, again, we felt like it might possibly be another option for local control. We know there's a problem and we're trying to find solutions that are least horrid. And Rob, to your point about your wife, I agree. I wouldn't have wanted to do it either, but when I was on emergency bed rest, someone did start for me and she did okay, but everyone's different. So that's why universities have rubrics for that criteria of who would even qualify.
You said earlier that this proposal has been on your agenda, or it's been kicked around by your board for a while. Did I misunderstand that?
So I mean, kicked around as when I inform my board of what other states are doing. We didn't kick it around. We kick a lot of things around.
Sure.
And whenever I come back from a conference, I say, here's what I learned. Here's what other states are doing. So kicked around in the sense that I always tell my board, because I'm part of NASDAQ, the group of the me's in the world. And so we meet periodically, and I attended a webinar from Minnesota, see what they were doing. South Dakota has statute for this that was just implemented because of the 260, well, not because of this, but, currently there are 264 positions open in Rapid City. So other states are doing it. So I have informed our board. So, but they had not.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that clarification. I guess the question that was leading up to was we just came through a legislative session earlier this year. Were there bills during that session that could have helped this that failed? Were there bills that should have been introduced that weren't? Did you get anything from the legislature what you needed to address it? Because again, this is a long-term problem. We've known about this for a while. Did you get what you needed? And it just as one anecdote of that, I was reading a tweet. This is from State Representative Zach Ista. He's a Democrat from Grand Forks. This is what he wrote on Twitter. He said, "This board," referring to your board, "helped defeat my bill last session to save teachers time and money by issuing lifetime licenses after 20 years in the profession. Now the same board wants to let unlicensed teachers have their own classroom this fall. Make it make sense." So I think his argument was, listen, I tried to do something to address this, and this board opposed me. So I guess talk about that. I mean, did the legislature need to do more? Could they have done more?
There's a couple pieces to this, Rob, and I don't want to hog the stage here, but so with our apprenticeship work that we're doing in close collaboration with DPI, they did help that incredibly. Going to have great benefits. It just is a shorter, it is money, but they're not going to be available soon. So the legislature funded amazingly the apprentice work. And North Dakota has an apprenticeship model. We have the first principal apprenticeship model in the nation. So in that sense, absolutely. And we were at the table for that apprenticeship work because we work closely with our higher ed institutions to do the para to teacher pipeline. We have House Bill 1304, which is a special ed bill that there wasn't much opposition to at all, which allows people who have completed their special ed training in the first 2 years. It's a flipped model. So they get their 2 years right away. They've student taught, passed the praxis, but they have not completed all their coursework. They can have a special ed authorization. So that was helpful to our field. We haven't licensed any of those people yet, but it's not time for school to start yet. So that was really helpful. Yes, to the person that you quoted did put forth a bill about giving a 20-year license, and I took it to our board and asked them how they would like me to testify. And they said, obviously I testified in opposition and I was the only one. And their rationale for that was the background check piece, that people have to self-report along the way. And so that was the reason, that was the main reason, honestly. It wasn't re-education credits at all. It was that was a piece of it, but we know that teachers are lifelong learners anyway. You have to be in a school, for credit or not. You have to keep learning. So it was the background check. And so I was asked to generate cases where people self-reported. And so that was the main reason that our board asked me to testify like I did. That was the reason. And again, I ask every bill that comes up, I say to my board, how shall I testify? So the legislators did a lot for teachers last session, definitely. I think moving forward, Chad, I'll come knocking at your door pretty soon with multiple other ideas that have to do with other things for those 30-year licenses. And those people, I mean, it would keep them in the field for sure. They deserve something, but it wouldn't have helped put people in this fall, realistically. I mean, I understand.
But back over the years, we've focused so much on recruitment and not on retention. And I think often some of these recruitment efforts that lower the standards for teachers hurt our retention efforts. I would say, I think there's something like 15, 16 different paths that are non-traditional in order to get a teacher or adult in a classroom. I think that at some point we don't do enough analysis about, okay, there's a student teacher in a classroom that doesn't have another teacher in that room. What does that mean for the teachers around them in terms of workload and making that person successful? We don't talk enough about retention. We don't talk about the unintended consequences enough on any of these things. And this isn't, again, I've been in this position for 8 or 9 years, and it's like deja vu all over again. Every July and August, it's like administrators are coming back to their buildings and are like, oh no, we have a bunch of openings, as if something is different from the year prior. They come to you, they contact people in your office and say, help me fill these positions by working around the rules. That's not ESPB's job to figure out how to work around the rules. Your job is to make sure we have good, high quality teachers in every classroom. That's missing. So I'm going to get to a question. That was commentary, and you can respond to that. I apologize for that. But one of my other concerns, and Representative Ista sort of hit on this, is the mixed messages coming from ESPB to the legislature. On one hand, mentorship is so important. You guys are looking for more funding. I think you're looking for funding from the governor's office and DPI and other places to beef up this wonderful program that is proven to keep teachers in the classroom. But on the other hand, you're now saying, you're in the middle of student teachers teaching, you can handle this. You can handle this on your own. We don't need this other stuff. Help me understand the mixed messaging. And if I'm a state legislator, why am I not saying, let's cut the mentorship program? ESPB is telling us anybody can do this without training.
Sure. No, and I understand perception can drive reality. So I can't remember what your commentary was on. So I won't respond to that, but I will answer your question. So I would say that people who student teach, those few that meet the criteria, who have had extended experiences, and honestly, it would most likely be people who are in the parent-to-teacher program who have had extended experience in the field already, that the EPPs would even let in the field. Because with the apprenticeship model, and there is a reason I'm detouring to this, they have to have more experience in the field, because the more experience you have in the field, the better you are. So the EPPs are looking at people who have had extended experience in the field already and have had lots of sub experiences. Maybe they did a maternity leave. This is not for everyone. And so our numbers are not going to be low. So I would say that mentoring as it is, you're right. We have data that mentoring keeps people in the field. Marika and Aaron have amazing data on that. So I would say those people would still need to be in it. And we would look for the local school person who has been in the mentoring program to assist those few that will even be allowed to do this. So I don't think it sends mixed messages. We know and believe that mentoring retains teachers even up to the second year. And, we have implemented a disability waiver lately. We're collecting data on where are those people, because we realize that the test can be a barrier. So we're looking at barriers that would prohibit those who are really excellent in the field to become teachers. So we fully support Aaron and Marika, and it's just, their work is amazing. So that was not a message we want to send. We look for people who have been through that program because it is so amazingly solid. And that's why, again, there's a sunset clause on this. You collect data. That's easy to do. It's a small state. We know exactly who those people are. Alan Burgad, Dr. Burgad of Valley City can tell me he's going to have 2. And they're people that are in the apprenticeship program and they've had multiple field experiences already. And the school has said, I've seen them do long-term sub experiences. Therefore, but again, it's up to the governor.
So what is I know you've put this question before the governor. Ultimately, it's Governor Burgum's decision. I know he sent your board a list of questions in response to your request. I don't know if you've sent answers back yet, but getting beyond that, what does a long-term solution to this look like? And I understand they're probably not going to come from your board. I mean, the weird thing we're talking about here is the legislature also, obviously has a role to play. But also we're talking about hiring decisions that are made by school districts and school boards across the state. Right. And by the way, elected school board members who are far more numerous than elected lawmakers. So, I mean, how do we get to a point where every fall isn't Groundhog Day, where we have another headline about a teacher shortage? Because like Chad said, I mean, I've been seeing these headlines this time of year, every year, for about as long as I've been writing about politics in North Dakota. So where's the discussion of a long-term solution rather than stopgap solutions every year?
I think one of the long-term solutions is the apprenticeship step, which is what's already going on, is that's getting our students who are really great with kids in the pipeline really soon. So I think that's a multiple pronged response. It doesn't happen right away, but I know that Bismarck Public is partnering with UMary to get some dual credits in high school. Looking at kids, I mean, I taught high school for years. There were so many kids that were gifted. When I was an elementary principal, I went to the high school and said, can you come read in my building? You're amazing. Would you be a teacher? So I think we have that piece going, that we need to be stronger in our getting kids who are really great with children and who care deeply. And that's one prong. The second prong is, I think we need to market the profession, that this is really amazing profession. This week, I thought to myself, my best job ever was a second grade teacher in Hawaii. And I just want to go in a classroom with kids. That was this week. So I think we have multiple prongs, but I think it's also just teachers need to talk about how really great it is. Yeah, it's really hard. But you know what? I have a rock here. This is a rock I got recently when I went to do PD in a district, and a teacher came up to me that she looked kind of familiar, and she said, I had you as an education professor long ago, and I was not going to be a teacher, and you kept telling me stories about how amazing this profession is. So she said, I got this rock from my student who said, you're the best thing that ever happened to me, so I'm going to give you this rock back. I mean, so those stories are so powerful. Like, this is, working with children is so remarkable. We have no intention of lowering this profession. This is not going to solve the problem. This is a Band-Aid, which is why I want a sunset clause. It's not going to be probably more than 10 for fall. And if it doesn't work, we throw it away. And then meanwhile, we attempt some other pieces on the other end. And I do have a suggestion, Chad, for some 30-year people we talked about yesterday. So I think it's a multifaceted. If I could show you the spreadsheet of what my board came up with yesterday, it's the cost, which is the apprenticeship model. It costs, you can't come out from school with $70,000 in debt and then go make whatever teachers make now.
Not enough.
Well, that I know. I just didn't want to throw out a number because I have been out of the classroom a few years. So I think it's a multi-pronged. I think we're already planning for a summit next summer. We didn't have one this summer, shortage summit. I don't want to just rehash it, but I think the apprenticeship has caused all of us to think differently. Never has teaching been an apprenticeship, so that there is more time on task. Districts are on board. So I think we've got a lot of pieces in place that are so different. Higher ed is thinking about competencies. So there's not redundancy in coursework. So when you go from one college to another, you don't have to repeat coursework, because that is financially not wise. So lots of spinning plates.
Yeah, Becky, I'm going to take the heat off of you for a second, if that's okay. So I think you mentioning, propping up the profession is absolutely an important thing. I want to give a shout out to former teacher of the year, Brett Doctor and Harvey, who's really focused on why he's in the profession and keeping others in the profession. I know North Dakota United is committed to telling that story of why people are staying in the profession. But part of it also has to be, us thinking about how we treat folks in this profession. And if you look at polling on it, often it's the quality and support they get from their building administrator is the number one reason why they stay or leave the profession. But also when we talk about, we have a shortage of state's attorneys, we have a shortage of judges, we have a shortage of nurses. When we talk about those things, we always talk about, well, I think we need to raise the pay. We need to make these things. We never talk about the state bar coming in and saying, hey, we need a state's attorney out in Western North Dakota. Let's lower the bar so somebody who hasn't gone to law school or passed the bar can be the state's attorney. We never talk about lowering the criteria to be a doctor or a nurse or whatever. We talk about what can we do incentive-wise. The other thing we need to do a better job of making these jobs better for teachers is we need to hire more paras. We need to hire more support staff who can give them the support they need when their classrooms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That takes resources, and it takes paying those people more, because an average para makes $15, $16, $17 an hour. That's not going to be a career for very long. So I think there's big conversations that we can have here, but the biggest message I want to send to teachers is you need to stand up for your profession. And because, again, all these other professions where we have shortages, hey, shocking news, Williston can't find teachers. Well, Williston can't find anybody else to do any other jobs either, right? And so, this is a problem in the country, in the world, and we just need to get together. And I don't think necessarily short-term solutions like this help with the long-term solutions for the profession. And we can obviously agree to disagree there. Rob, that's my final point. How's that?
Yeah. Well, Chad apparently forgot we have the whole second half of the show for him to get up on his.
So I want to say, with all due respect, Chad, I agree with everything you're saying. Our board thought this might be a solution for a few to collect data when we don't have the bodies to put in a few qualified chip away without lowering the standards, because they've had all their teacher ed coursework, just not their. And we have a residency model at UND, which is amazing. So for those that have had extended field experiences already, EPPs will have to decide. So I think we're on the same page. We'll agree to disagree, and we'll chat more about all my board came up with yesterday.
Yeah,
so, the governor, and who even knows?
I also think this conversation would be different if we hadn't set up 15, 16, 17 different pathways that have already chopped away at this criteria. I think it just feels like every year there's another little chipping away, that it's the slippery slope argument. Rob, I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, so I just have to say one thing. This is not a rebuttal, but we didn't do some of the legislation. We testified, but you're so right. I mean, anyway, yeah.
We as a state, I was talking about we as a state.
I didn't know, like you and me, Chad. Nice to meet you. Tell your wife thanks for being a teacher. Best. When I retire, I'm going right back. Let me tell you.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. My favorite part of the interview is you said your best job ever was a second grade teacher in Hawaii. I think most people's best job ever would be doing something in Hawaii. Like, my best job ever was picking up trash on the beach in Hawaii.
Okay, full disclosure, after 1 year of second grade, I went right back to middle school. So don't think it's all that great.
I don't know. I think I sometimes think I would like first graders more than I would like middle schoolers, because I have sometimes I can't take all the eye rolling and the assumption that I'm stupid right out of the gate.
As a mom of adult children, your intelligence will grow as they grow older. It's remarkable how happens.
Well, it's like a curve, because they start where they think you're the smartest person in the world, and then there's like a 5-year period where you're the dumbest person in the world, and then you start getting smarter again in their eyes. So who knows? Becky, thank you so much for.
It's all about the prefrontal cortex.
Is that what it is?
They're supposed to be somewhat brain damaged in middle school because there is a lot of growth going on. So just rest assured, as a middle school teacher, I personally thought they were amazing.
Yeah. Well, they are amazing. I just don't like them all the time. So we'll leave it there. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
Don't
Becky.
put that on your show. That's the piece you just kind of delete. Thanks, guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Cool, host of the Northland Outdoors podcast. Hey, here in the Northland, we love our time outside. And on the Northland Outdoors podcast, we're going to talk about all of it. Not just fishing, not just hunting, but mountain biking, camping, rock climbing, bird watching, you name it. We're going to have it on the Northland Outdoors podcast. New episodes every 2 weeks on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So look for it and join us on the Northland Outdoors podcast.
Okay, just finished up our interview with Rebecca Pitkin. She is the head of the Education Standards and Practices Board that is trying to get what she admits is a Band-Aid. I don't even want to use the word solution. I was going to call it a Band-Aid solution. It's not a solution. She said it's not a solution. It's not going to solve the problem. They're trying to do something to get warm bodies into some of these positions. And Chad, I mean, you made the point towards the end. You know, one of the obvious solutions is pay more. Which is a nice thought, except that money has to come from somewhere. So you're saying, well, pay more for paras, hire more people, pay the people you have more. But we're also in a political environment where Rick Becker is currently touring the state saying, let's get rid of property taxes because they're too high. Right. And you have North Dakotans who are perpetually incensed by their property taxes. I don't know if it's going to be enough for them to vote for Becker's ballot measure to eliminate property taxes, but I know they're ticked about it. And so when you start saying, pay teachers more, I think the average voter's hearing, well, where's that money going to come from? And that's a tough, because the thing is, I agree with you. You know, that's certainly one way to first of all retain the teachers you have, which is a part of this. Right. I agree with you. We don't talk about enough, but also to get new teachers in the door. The problem is, where's the money come from?
Listen, I think that's obviously a really, really good point, and I think that we undersell what the constituents of North Dakota want in terms of K through 12 funding. You know, I just saw a poll that talked about the increase of 4% this year. The vast majority of North Dakotans don't think that was enough, and they want it to be bigger. Now, did we ask the question, would you raise your income taxes in order to do that? No. But I think in polling I've seen in the past, people would rather fund K through 12 than have an income tax cut. I will tell you that much. But I think part of it also is school districts looking at, we've seen, an increase in school personnel that's not in the classroom, right? That isn't working with students. So
administrative bloat, that's the term for it.
And part of it is bureaucracy, right? I mean, they would say it's because we have to do all this other stuff for the feds and the state and all these different things. But I think looking at how the FTEs are administered and then getting more aggressive in the recruitment. I agree 100% with what Becky was saying about propping up the profession. But it can't be a false prop up either, right? You can't just say, come teach, it's going to be great. And then it's like, oh my goodness, this is really hard. It's a really hard job.
Come teach, it's going to be great, but your first time in the classroom, you're going to be on your own. We're going to throw you to the wolves. And I think that's really a big part of this specific proposal, which again, I don't want to make it seem like Becky was holding this up as some panacea. It's not. She knows that. She acknowledged that. But this puts student teachers in a bad position. Because if you live in a school district that wants to do this, and they say, we want you to do this, student teacher, and you're thinking, I eventually want to be hired by this school district and have a career here, do you feel like you could say no? Because I'm not sure you feel like you could say no. It's hard to say no to people who are your bosses or could be your bosses.
I talked to a teacher the other day who works in an urban district, and it was a third or fourth grade, and there was 3 sections of the third graders in the school, and they hired a third teacher, and that teacher just didn't show up. And so their classes went from 18 kids up to 27 kids, just third or fourth grade. That's a problem, right? But they had a student teacher who this teacher was the student of record. So they used the student teacher not to have her own classroom by herself, but instead to take groups of students to do more hands-on learning to allow those classroom sizes. You can already do that, right? Districts can already do that by making sure that student teachers getting what they need in the classroom, in addition to decreasing classroom sizes. One thing that I didn't ask Becky about, because by the end of the interview, I did feel like I was piling on a little bit more because it isn't just her decision. I think what the ESPB board did here is put the governor in a really, really tough position, because on one hand, he signs this thing. It means he's circumvented the legislature. We know how the legislature feels about Governor Burgum doing things without working through the legislature. If he doesn't sign it, do the people in districts with open classrooms say the governor is not trying to help us get a warm body into these things? I think it puts him in a really, really tough position. And I think if I was Doug Burgum, the legislature not liking him do things by executive order might be in my mind right now.
Well, let me put it to you this way, because I think one of the problem is there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and it's like, because everybody owns this problem, nobody owns it. Because in terms of policy, you have the ESPB board, which really only controls a relatively small portion of education policies, just licensing. And then you have the governor, who's obviously, he's got a role in the legislative process, and he's got a role, being asked by the ESPB to do this, so he's got a role in signing executive orders. Then you have the legislature, which obviously funds schools and funds raises and has the power of appropriation and makes the law for licensing and everything else. And then you have school boards all over the state. And then even below those school boards, you have superintendents and principals and everybody who make a lot of the actual hiring decisions. There are so many people who own this problem. It kind of feels like everybody could kind of kick the can around, right? The school boards could say, well, the legislature should have done something. And the legislature could say, well, the ESPB board should have done something. And the ESPB board could say, oh, the governor should have done something. I mean, it seems like nobody owns this issue. And so nobody has the accountability to solve it.
So I don't want people listening to this think that nothing is being done on teacher shortage, because I think Becky talked about a couple things last session. One is the para-to-teacher pipeline. It's basically trying to get paras to be teachers, and it's very successful. I just met a teacher who went through that program who's now teaching in Rolette, I think, or Belcourt, somewhere up there. And then also this teacher apprenticeship thing through the federal government, where it's really trying to get teachers into the classroom through an apprentice program. Both of those programs really led by the Department of Public Instruction, and trying to get that funding put together. Those will be more long-term. I mean, again, we need to figure out how to get more people into the pipeline who are qualified teachers, but at the same time, we need to make sure that their veteran teachers are feeling like it's a job they can stay in for the long run. Because the reality is, and you know this, I mean, are married to a teacher, those skills are very transferable that teachers have to a business, to a nonprofit, to they're very marketable skills, being able to manage a classroom of 25 little people. A lot of people want those skills. And so we need to do enough that we're making sure people want to stay in the classroom, get them in, but then how do you keep them in is often the most difficult part.
So I don't know. I mean, I get back to one of the central problems. I think what prohibits us from doing a lot of things is that it's going to take money to do it. And the appetite for North Dakotans, even if you say, well, they'd rather pay students more than have an income tax cut, maybe. I'm not so sure. I would be. The problem is anything that we're going to do is going to put more burden on the taxpayers, and I don't think the taxpayers in North Dakota want it. You could say whether they're right or wrong, or whether or not they should want it. I just don't think they do. I think that's a political reality. So I mean, you were talking about, I think there's administrative bloat in K-12. I think at some point, and the point I'm trying to get to is, at some point, it's like we have to put a holistic package on the table, and everybody's got to feel some pain. Which is to say that, so some of the licensing stuff North Dakota United doesn't like, that may have to be part of the equation. It may be that taxes have to go up, because we have to pay people more and we have to hire more staff. And it could also be that some of these school districts got to cut the bureaucracy, where we have a lot of people, and it's in higher ed too, where it's the number of people who are in the classroom doing instruction or doing research are dwarfed now by the number of people who are doing God knows what in administration. So there's got to be a holistic reform package to this. The problem is that it's gonna ask a lot of key constituencies to do things they don't want to do.
Right. And, I will, Representative Matt Ruby brought a bill last session that would have forced superintendent consolidation in small districts in order to save money and then have that money go to teachers. Good on paper, but people didn't line up behind the idea of the stick approach to consolidation of superintendents. Towns don't want to lose their superintendent, right?
In the same way they didn't want to lose their back when we were doing school consolidations.
Right.
They didn't want to lose their high school.
But I think at some point districts need to be thinking about, can they consolidate administrative services? Can they consolidate and share English teachers? I mean, if there's an English teacher in some small town who's teaching 8 kids, is there ways for them to spend half day in one town, half day in another town? I think they're also just created, like, we have this struggle with recruiting teachers, but it seems like an unwillingness beyond dumbing down the standards to think about the way we staff up our schools differently.
Well, and I was hesitant to bring this up because it's more of a recent phenomena, and this is a long-standing problem. But some of the stuff we're seeing going on, where teachers are being called groomers and pedophiles, and some of the stuff we've seen at school boards and parents, it's a scary thing to be a teacher right now, because you watch all these stories about, well, so-and-so teacher put something on Facebook. And I'm not talking about like where the teacher's like a sex worker or something, like the really far out there ones. But I'm just talking about like political stuff, like such and such a teacher is a Republican or a Democrat, and a parent doesn't like that. There's conflict. And now there's a lot of people that look at this profession and say, I don't want that. I want to teach kids. I don't want to deal with the parents.
Right. And again, our polling shows when people are thinking about leaving, paying benefits always pops. I mean, it's always something since the beginning of time. But the second one is the political football that public schools have become, and dealing with parents. And I mean,
the critical race theory stuff. Like, well, what is critical race theory? If I'm teaching a history class and we get into a very provocative conversation about race relations in America, and some student doesn't like it, and he whines to mommy and daddy go to the school board, and now all of a sudden I'm on the front page of the newspaper because I was trying to have a discussion with a bunch of high school students about a sticky topic.
And I think talking about, how hard it is to be a teacher, we can't just dismiss how hard it is to be a building administrator dealing with those things as well. I mean, they're sort of the first line of defense to have the backs of their teachers, but also they're the ones that have to deal with the parents coming in about books, about critical race theory, about Mrs. Smith has a pride flag in her classroom, those kind of things. Those jobs are really, really tough in dealing with sort of the, people often say public schools are the places where society's ills really have to be dealt with because you can't avoid them because every kid is there. And it's true. And we have a vocal minority of parents that we want parents engaged, right? You and I want to be engaged in our kids. And we've talked about sometimes.
But they're not engaging in good faith.
Right. And in the right places.
Which is one of the problems. I mean, really, this problem is a microcosm of a larger problem in our society, where we have what I perceive as vocal minorities who are not interested in engaging society in good faith, engaging whether it's our democratic processes or whether it's just, your relations with the local school. It's everybody's looking, they want to go viral on Facebook. They want, or it's everybody has to conform to my standard of what books should be on the library shelf and everything else. There's no give anymore. There's no compromise anymore. And this is one of the places where it's manifesting itself.
Yeah. And I think I think the books thing is a perfect example. You have small groups of parents saying, I don't want this book. I don't want this book. I don't want this book. Well, maybe I don't want gun violence. Maybe I don't want, where's the line in me getting to determine what other people's kids get to read, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not fair for a small group of parents to determine what every other person's values are.
Also, it's
in our schools.
I just want to interject. It's not fair to say anybody is for gun violence in schools, except for the tiny minority of freaks that do it.
Hold on. I mean, in books. I mean, gun violence in books.
Okay. Well, I didn't understand that. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, I was talking about in the realm of books, or maybe it's a somebody who's a non-Christian who doesn't like, over the top Christian stuff in a book or whatever. I mean, where's it stop?
As a parent, like, I'm not, obviously we have our values in our household and we talk about those, and I talk to my kids. But one thing that I'm not afraid of is my kids being exposed to things that run contrary to what I believe. They're going to grow up and they're going to be adults. And my job isn't to indoctrinate them so they believe everything dad believes. What I'm hoping to do is instill in them, some pretty good fundamental ethics, like work hard, don't steal, be honest, be kind. And then the rest of that stuff will take care of itself. I'm not afraid that my kid's going to go to school and talk to a teacher who's going to tell them some things that I might not like. They might bring those things to me and we'll talk about them, and I might explain why I disagree. And that's society. I mean, if you're going to live in a free society, your kids are going to see things that you disagree with, and you may just have to accept that.
Yeah, the only thing I'm indoctrinating my son in is that he has to be a Dodgers fan. Beyond that, it's all those other values that you just described. Yeah,
well, I mean, it could be worse. You could be indoctrinating him to be a fan of a heartbreaking team like the Cubs or something. So I guess that's
yeah. Although, geez, they're killing it these days.
That's true.
Scoring a lot of runs.
Listen, I'm a Yankees fan, and we're having a horrible year. So we're gonna get off baseball right now. And I think, going back to teacher shortage, I do think thinking about other professions and how we're responding to those shortages and how it's so much different than we respond to teacher shortages. Yeah. We never talk about dumbing down. And I was thinking this morning about the interview we had with David Crothers, like a couple of years ago, when he was talking about sort of the judge shortage and how the Supreme Court asked for huge raises for judges around the state because they need to pay them more. Yeah, it's a weird thing because it's like nobody wants. Well, if I'm accused of a crime, do I want the person on the bench to have half a law degree?
Right.
Or if I'm having a heart attack, do I want the nurse working on me to have half a nursing degree?
Or like there's been in the previous couple sessions a move to create sort of a mid-level dentistry because there is a dentist shortage. You know who didn't want that? Dentists who went to school and paid a bunch of money.
Although some of that, there is a point at which occupational licensing works like it's protectionism.
Yes, agreed. Turf completely. I want ESPB to do that a little bit more for teachers. How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah. Well, fair enough. Shall we move on? What are some other topics we should? Valley News Live covering itself in journalistic excellence. It was late at night and somebody sent me a text and they said Donald Trump gave Doug Burgum a nickname, right? Because everybody's been waiting for Trump to acknowledge Burgum. Part of me wonders if Burgum's been waiting for Trump to acknowledge
exact
him.
Same
it would
thing.
be great.
I thought maybe he came up with the.
I was thinking Doug. So what I was sent was a screenshot of Valley News Live's article about, and it had in there an image of what purported to be a Trump Truth Social being the social media platform that Trump's company owns, or a company named. I don't know how all that works. But anyway, Trump posts on Truth Social. It was a Truth Social post, and it called Dud Burgum. Dud Burgum was Dud, as in, here, I can actually read. This is what, now Donald Trump didn't actually post this. This is what purportedly he posted. Said, despite your beloved and favorite 45th president being arrested today, I still have a very impressive lead against GOP rhinos like Dakota Dud Burgum, who is funded by Bill Gates and Dr. Lock-em-up Fauci. Dud has a worse rating than season 16 of American Idol, a very sad show. Now, the thing is that was actually made by a satirical Twitter account called the Flickertail Times, which has existed for a few years. Apparently, and they confirmed to me, by the way, today. They tweeted at me saying that they had created it. Their profile describes them as North Dakota's premier source for fake news. But apparently somebody at Valley News Live saw that, took the image, Didn't acknowledge Flickertail Times at all. Just took the image and said, Trump posted this. Now, when I saw it, I was thinking, I want to go. So I actually it prompted me to make a Truth Social account, which I did not have. So I did that so you folks don't have to. And I logged in and I'm scrolling up and down Trump's feed trying to find this post. Like, where is this? What happened to this? Like, do I not know how to work Truth Social? Where I can't find this. So I go back to the Valley News Live article, and now the article's down, and then the Facebook page is down, and then I find the Flickertail Journal Twitter post where they originally, and I was like, okay, they got punked. And it's just hilarious to me that somebody, like, my first impulse when I saw it was go find Trump's original post. And, I wanted to see, are people replying to it? Are people, has he said anything else? And they didn't do that. They just saw something on Twitter and they just ran with it as an article and then had to take it down. And I dunked on him a little bit. I for people who don't know, I actually used to appear on Valley News Live. Chris Berg had a evening, it's called 6:30 Point of View, and he would have me on now and then. And they actually suspended me, Chad, for because it was around the time Drew Wrigley was in the headlines, and they said that they had they said that he was declining to interview them, and I happen to know that he wasn't declining to interview them. They didn't contact him the way they said he contacted him. They didn't show up to his public briefings, so they were like, "Well, he's ducking the media," and he's like, "No, I weren't. They didn't show up." So I talked about that. I said, this is dishonest, and they suspended me, and I decided to never, ever go on their show again.
Well, I'm shocked to learn that their news director allowed something like this to happen. I mean, wasn't he just in the press earlier this week for firing Hutch Johnson, the beloved weatherman at KVLY?
That could be.
Then, I will tell you, I got the tweet sent to me, and my first thought was, oh my goodness, this is a good sign for Doug Burgum.
Yeah.
That he must be making some whatever. And then I instantly got another text from the same person that said, hold on, this is fake. And then I saw your column about KVLY. And, if this isn't the perfect example of fake news, I mean, I'm guessing people like Chris Berg, who's no longer at KVLY, has called out fake news a lot over the years, but it's something.
I don't know. And by the way, I like Chris. I didn't always like everything he had to say when he was at Valley News Live, but I think he's a very nice person. I've always liked Chris Berg a lot, but
I hated his show. The gotcha stuff always drove me crazy.
I wasn't a big fan of that. But anyway, that was kind of an interesting little thing. The other thing, what else could we talk about? Oh, the mystery $2 million donation to Doug Burgum's not to his campaign, to his super PAC. And for people wondering, this is one of the greatest fictions in American politics. What a super PAC is they could take unlimited donations, and ostensibly they're supposed to be independent of the campaign. So campaign donation limits don't apply. Corporations, unions, associations. So all these candidates will have what's called a super PAC aligned with them. And the super PAC can take unlimited donations. So they have more flexibility, but they cannot coordinate with the campaigns, which is silly. Because a lot of times the people who are on these super PACs are like relatives of the candidate.
Rob, they set up like websites where they'll say like that's so it's in the public domain, so they're not communicating directly, but they don't tell people what this website is that says things like, boy, it would be we're showing that we're losing in Iowa. It'd sure be great if we could see more TV, if we get more support around X issue or something on the air.
The thing is political campaigns are done out in the light of day, so it's not difficult. And also like who are we protecting? Like Doug Burgum, the same as anybody else, can go and look up and see who's donated to his super PAC.
Right.
So the idea that
the campaign can doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what Doug Burgum would want a super PAC to say.
So Doug Burgum can just write it. And listen, we're not piling on. He's not doing anything different than any other candidate, Republican or Democrat. So this is not a Doug Burgum issue. But Doug Burgum could tweet out, boy, this issue is really important. And then his super PAC could see that and say, let's run a bunch of ads about it.
Right.
Like, okay, so it comes out and the requirements for the third GOP debate come out. Doug Burgum would the second GOP debate. Doug Burgum would no doubt like to be on the stage for the second GOP debate. Well, one of the things he needs is he's got to be at 3% in the national polls. What is the super PAC busy doing? Raising money to run national advertising in support of Doug Burgum. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we should just get rid of the campaign limits to campaigns and just make them report every penny in, every penny out, do it all through the campaigns, because this independent stuff is nonsense. It's not independent. Donating to campaigns is a protected First Amendment right, whether you're a Democrat or a socialist or a Republican or a libertarian, what have you. It's your right to use your money how you see fit in pursuit of your political objectives. I would get rid of all the limitations, other than I don't think foreigners should be allowed to donate to political, but outside of that, just get rid of all the limitations and just report everything and
So
leave it
would
at
you
that.
fine with union dues, corporations, and that kind of stuff, or would you still limit it to individuals and PACs?
I would be fine. I would be fine. The only problem unions have is that if you're talking about a 100% voluntary union, I mean, the problem is sometimes union membership is compulsory, and I have a problem with, I'm a steel worker, the law, I'm required to pay union dues, and now my union dues are being used to support political candidates I don't like. That's the only caveat. I have a problem with that. I think if we could fix that, where you don't have to pay union dues if you don't want to be a member of the union, then I don't have a problem.
How about if I'm a stockholder in a corporation? I suppose that's voluntary, that if they decide to spend that money. Okay.
Yeah. If you don't want to be a part of the corporation, you can divest or raise hell at the stock. And understanding, I mean, if you're some big, like the National Dentists Association, which probably doesn't exist. I'm making this up.
By the way, Second Dental Association reference during this podcast.
I don't know why dentists are such a big deal. Maybe I need to make an appointment. I don't know. If obviously, like, not all their membership, if they were going to endorse a presidential candidate, which seems unlikely, maybe only 30% of their membership wanted to endorse the other guy or something. I mean, some of that stuff you have to accept. But I mean, still, you could choose not to be a part of the association. Then, everybody should get a choice, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Rob, you started this out by talking about the mystery $2 million donation.
Oh, we didn't even get there.
You've let people hang. You just left them hanging.
Okay.
Who's the mystery donor?
So I am about, and I'm going to be hopefully writing on this because I'm trying to get confirmation. So this is unconfirmed, but I'm about 90% positive it is Michael Chambers, who is a co-founder of Aldebaran, was a guest, Governor Doug Burgum's guest to his 2021 State of the Union address, where he talked about Aldebaran is a biotech startup in Fargo. What was recently acquired for like $9.6 billion. And the way I tracked this down, and I had some help from readers because I wrote my initials, so like, who is this? It's showing up in Doug's Super PAC was this Farrington Rocket LLC. And I'm trying to think of Farrington Rocket. And they donated $2 million. So it wasn't like they gave like $500 or something.
By the way, great name for an LLC.
Farrington Rocket? Yeah.
Rocket should be included in any LLC.
Yeah. So Farrington Rocket, I'm trying to figure out, well, who is this that gave almost 20% of the money to Doug Burgum's Super PAC in their first filing? So I went looking for it. They were a Delaware corporation, which is not surprising. Like, because of Delaware's unique corporate laws, a lot of big corporations file in Delaware. And also because Delaware allows a degree of secrecy that other states don't necessarily allow. The registered agent was a company. I had a fascinating trip through this. The registered agent was this. It's called the Corporate Services Company, which was founded in the 19th century specifically to facilitate corporate filings in Delaware. And they're the registered agent for like 90% of the Fortune 500. So they were the registered agent. So I gave them a call and said, "Hey, who's Farrington Rocket?" And they said, "Yeah, right. We're not talking to you."
Nice try, kid.
Nice try. A nice try. Yeah. And she told me we're not at liberty to give out. The very nice lady in customer service told me that they're not at liberty to give out information about their clients. So I started Googling around, and I found that Farrington Rocket LLC owned a private airplane registered with the FAA out of West Fargo. But I couldn't find a street address, and that's when I wrote my first column, saying, "Hey, readership, help me out. Well, some very good readers were able to find additional FAA registration information on the internet that put it at an address in West Fargo, and it was a UPS store that shared an address, like the address at the UPS store, including the box number, which I'm assuming is the box number, shared an address with a foundation called the Centurion Foundation. It's a 501c3. Initially filed in their first filing was 2021, and according to their Form 990, the trustee for that foundation is Michael Chambers and his wife Victoria. So I have an inquiry into Michael Chambers to see who it is. And the thing about this is none of this is scandalous.
None of it is scandalous. Yeah, because a $2 million donation to a super PAC seems like a whole lot of money.
It's not.
But yeah, there's people who give $50 million or $100 million to other super PACs.
Big. I mean, I don't want to say it, but like the big swingers, like the Mark Cubans of the world or the Sheldon Adelsons of the world. Those people, yeah. I mean, they throw around. It was just that. Who is Farrington Rocket? I mean, when Sheldon Adelson, I mean, you know, it's like it's made through some whatever, and you could track it. This one, it was just, and I did it. I went through all this work because I believe the public deserves to know.
Well, and I think it gave the appearance of somebody trying to hide by, sort of doing it through this LLC.
I don't want to say.
For all we know, but for all we know, it's like just a business thing. I don't know how the millionaires work.
I don't know how his finances work. I don't know how it goes through. So maybe it was just convenient for Mr. Chambers financially to do it through this LLC. I don't know. He did it that way. It was weird. It stuck out like a sore thumb. We were able to identify everybody else in that report. I wanted to identify this one, so I went on a little bit of a journey, and I should have a column up about it. And by the way, I have an inquiry into them. There's just too many coincidences. First of all, there's not that many people in West Fargo who can afford to drop $2 million into a super PAC. Right. So you're talking about a small number of people. There's too many coincidences. I'm waiting for confirmation from them, but it's I'm pretty sure it's them.
So Rob, now the question is, what does the super PAC do? Does it double down in New Hampshire and Iowa, or does it really just focus on trying to build those national numbers up?
Well, I mean, I don't know. The spokesperson for the PAC is an Emily Benavidi. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She's actually a former staffer for Rob Portman. When I had her on the phone, I actually complained to her. I used to get all our old boss's tweets all the time. He would do something to make people mad, and I'd wake up in the morning with like 500 people tweeting at me. And I'm just responding like, I am not the senator. I told her about that. She laughed. But she's on Twitter, she's been talking about, wanting, running a national, introducing Doug Burgum to the nation, running a national thing. And I think that's got to be his next step is starting to get those national poll numbers up, because otherwise he's going to drop off the debate.
How far does $11 million go nationally?
I don't know.
I suppose if you just focus on Fox News and some of those places nationally, you could probably raise the profile, but I don't know. I mean, I've never spent $11 million on a campaign, Rob.
I couldn't tell you. And by the way, that's $11 million through June 30th. And that's actually, it was actually a pretty impressive number. He had more money in his super PAC than Chris Christie, Mike Pence. He was hot on the heels of Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. Now, of course, Ron DeSantis was leading the field, but Ron DeSantis also proving money's not everything. Right. Donald Trump proving money's not everything. He was outspent by Hillary Clinton by many, many multiples and won anyway. And a lot of that is he was just really good at getting earned media. And ultimately, I think that sort of thing is going to be more important. I think Doug Burgum needs to have like a moment because of some sort of an exchange on a debate stage or something happens on the campaign trail. If he's going to rise in the ball, I think he has to have a moment. Otherwise, I think even if he spends a bunch of money on a national media campaign, he's going to bump his numbers maybe a few points and still be lost in the noise.
But he's like, if I'm working on his campaign, which I'm not, I would be sort of happy with where I'm at right now, right? He's checked all the boxes. If you would have probably asked them when he jumped in, where would you want to be at this point? They're qualified for the debate stage. They've got some national press over that weird credit card thing, which now other candidates are emulating.
Which was by the national press that worked out for him pretty well. And Doug spun it good. He called it a hack. and kind of spun it into this populist outsider breaking through the rules of the establishment to,
And the one thing he said that makes a lot of sense to me, and we've seen reports over the years of these fundraising companies that you pay $100 to in order to get like one new donor kind of thing. I mean, Dwayne Sand historically would pay some firm.
Which you know about money. Because I wrote about it, where at the end his campaigns were serving as a host body for a direct mail business.
Yeah, and so that it's not abnormal. So, I mean, I think Burgum did a pretty good job of spinning that. But he's in as good a position now as they could have expected to be. Trump we haven't talked about the fact that the former president got indicted again.
That's man bite. That's dog bites man at this point.
Yeah, but his numbers keep going up.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, the air's got to come out of the balloon here, Rob. At some point,
I would hope. Which kind of gets back. Here's a grand unifying theory for this entire episode: is the same sort of attitude. Democracy works when people participate in it in good faith. But if you're going in and you're saying, I'm just want to get my way, and if I don't get my way, I'm going to do everything I can to just take a wrecking ball to everything else, democracy doesn't work. So how does democracy function, right? I mean, like James Madison was writing up, I had this great quote from a columnist I like at the Dispatch, Nick Cottagio, and he was talking. He made this joke about, like, if you went back in time and we're talking to James Madison, hey, can you put something in the Constitution to address Americans electing an inmate? And he's like, Madison would have torn up the Constitution. Like, the whole thing is built on the idea that the people in the aggregate are going to make the right decisions. And when I say right decisions, I understand every election, people you like lose, people you don't like win. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in the aggregate, they're not going to elect somebody terrible. They're not going to elect an authoritarian Putin fetishist. They're going to elect somebody good. That's the assumption. But what if that assumption isn't? What if there's a large enough governing, like a large enough faction of the electorate where they're going to elect somebody who's in prison? And now we have to ask ourselves absurd constitutional questions like, well, do we put the Secret Service in jail with him? Is he on house arrest in the White House? You're laughing, Chad, but this is where we're at. He is facing potentially, now he's not ever going to get sentenced to 541, but if you add up the maximum sentences for all of the charges he's charged with just by the federal government, that's 541 years in prison. There is a not zero chance that he goes to prison. So what do we do if we elect a president who's in jail?
This is so simple. He pardons himself the first day in jail and takes care of all.
Okay, but what if the Supreme Court says no to that? Which they might. I mean, for all the feelings at the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court may not go for that. And if they don't go for that, then what does he do? Does he pressure the Department of Justice to withdraw the charges?
Let's just not elect a guy who's in prison.
That's what I'm trying to say. The problem, Chad, is I'm not sure that's going to happen. I'm not sure that's going to happen. By the way, I really like that Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis are going to debate, right?
Yeah, it's a really battle of the Titans for 2028.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you have a guy who's not running for president debating and also ran for president, who's probably not going to be the nominee. And it's going to be the most meaningful debate probably in this election cycle because, let's face it, the two most likely people to get the nominations are mentally compromised. One is going to have to use the delusion defense in court, right? He's going to go and he's going to say, well, all these lies I said about the election, I actually believed them. That could be a defense. Like, I believed them, so it can't be crimes that the federal government's alleging because I believed them when I said them, so they're protected First Amendment speech. That's the option on one side. And the other side is Joe Biden, which, I'm sorry, all due respect to the man, is not mentally competent to be holding that job right now and should be held by somebody else. So,
I appreciate, Dr. Port, your assessment of the mental health and stability of the President of the United States, but I don't think it's
by the way, in my defense, I'm being bipartisan here. I don't think either of them are qualified.
Yeah, but one has been indicted several times and one hasn't been indicted several times.
Okay, we're setting a low bar. That's a bar so low you could stumble over.
All I'm saying is don't put Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the same bucket of of wrongdoing.
Well, I'm not. I'm judging them both independently. Independently, I don't think
Bad people on both sides, right, Rob?
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that irrespective of who Joe Biden might be running against, he is too old for the job. Dianne Feinstein is too old for her job. Mitch McConnell is too old for his job.
Garrett Hendricks, are you listening? Rob Port just endorsed your constitutional measure.
I don't necessarily. I think that constitutional. I think that as a matter of the state constitution, I think it's unconstitutional.
I love the smirk you're doing as you're sort of spinning out of this thing.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad idea. I also think we need an age limit for like driver's licenses too. But
on the top end, yeah, I mean, it goes back to the conversation we had last week. Why do we have a bottom end if we don't have a top end on what you can be elected to, driving, all these different things? So I think we've talked our way out of this one, man.
Probably. We talked ourselves completely in circles, and we're like 15 minutes over time, so we better wrap it up here. Chad, thank you so much. Little programming note: will not have a Wednesday show next week because I'm going to be driving down to Des Moines to have a hootenanny at the state fair with Governor Burgum, so that'll be a lot of fun. And then but Friday I'll still be in Iowa. We're going to try to do record a show at some point on Friday. I just don't have my schedule yet, but if there's no show on Wednesday, don't panic. There'll probably be a show on Friday. Otherwise, we'll see you the week after. So thank you so much for listening.
Hey, Rob, have so much fun in Iowa. The Iowa caucus and the shenanigans around that is so fun. You know,
my wife told me she wants me to bring home a souvenir, but then she also said, I don't want anything political though. I don't want anything lame and political, so she wants something fun from the state fair. So we'll see. All right. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.